Hi, this is the third video in the series on how to build mobile app for SAP PO approval. The first video covered project structure, UI design, and retrieving a list. The second video covers basic authentication and retrieving CSRF token. And finally, this video covers uploading data to the backend. Okay, so let's move on to the data source here. Let's go to PO source. Let me open the app, M approval here. Now in the data source, last time when we did the basic authentication, we configured our get collection and a get record, but we did not do anything for the record, create record. Create record, basically whenever we want to send data to the backend, we have to define the source, the request, payload, and a response, or request schema and a response schema. Usually request and a response schema should match with your get record schema, because it's the same record being created or being retrieved, right? But in some instances, it's totally different from what we retrieve versus what we send. So in this case, in PO approval, the request schema is not really same, or it doesn't really matter what request schema we send, because all it cares is the URL parameters. And the response schema is, again, it's not the schema as a get record schema. So let's create those. I already prepared a few things. So here, in here, the base URL is same, so we don't have any differences there. Now, the rest of the path changes based on whether we are approving a request, a PO approval, a PO, or we are rejecting a PO. So for that, let me first copy the approval one as a reference. So this is the URL for approver. We have approve purchase order as a path, and then the client followed by PO ID and notes. So let me pause video and turn on my SAP system. I did not turn on. Okay, I can confirm it's on now. So let's move on. Now we have the purchase order approval as a path, followed by the PO ID and notes. So the OData service, all it cares about the PO ID and the notes. It doesn't really care about the request payload or the payload which we are going to send as part of body. So that's the first thing. Now the second thing is, if we go back to the base, we were sending authorization token to get ourselves authenticated using base 64 or a basic authentication. Along with this, like I said earlier, we need CSRF token. CSRF token is to prevent fraudulent transactions by pretending with like the request coming from the genuine page. You can read more on CSRF on Wikipedia. So we need CSRF token in the header. So that we are going to add it to our base URL. So let's go here to the base and then add another HTTP header. Label we'll call CSRF. Key is very important. This has to be the key which SAP expects, and I have copied. So let me get the key, and that's, by the way, I can type it here, XCSRF token, and type is text. This is not static. Every time whenever we fetch a token, we will get a new token. So that's why we'll set it as static off. Then pretty much that's all. Save. So now we have authorization and CSRF token. Now we'll go back to again create. So that HTTP header required prerequisite we just met by maintaining the CSRF token. Now in here, the purchase order, this path is dynamic. If it is approved, we send it to approval purchase order. If it is rejected, we send it to reject purchase order. So that we have to make this as a dynamic path. And to make a dynamic path, we could just do what we did it here. So again, let me go back to the where we have parameters here. In a get record, we had a parameter as the purchase order ID, which we were passing it to the URL. And the way we do it is by creating a URL placeholder, and we map this placeholder in the call on the UI. So we'll do the same thing. We'll create a URL parameter and we'll replace this static value with the URL parameter, and then based on what button we press, approve or reject, we will replace that variable value. So let's add a URL placeholder. We will call this as let's say a decision, We'll name the same way here. Text, is it static? No, it's not static again. And optional, okay, that doesn't really matter, so let's leave it as optional. And then, like what we did here, so the variable should be enclosed in curly braces there, and inside we will say decision. So now we have to pass the decision along with PO ID and notes. So again, we are using PO ID and notes here, so we will add those two as well. These I will copy for convenience. So PO ID, it's not static and optional. We need another parameter for notes. Again, I did these things. I kept it so I can make it faster here. Notes, it's not static, and save. So in create, we have 3 parameters to pass: the decision, PO ID, and notes. So pretty much that's all we need on config. Now going to test, we could test, but I already ran a test using the actual PO approval app, and that's how I got these. That's how I got these parameters. So we don't need to do a test. But if we go to schema, here is saying, okay, my schema for request and for response is same as get schema, and I explained earlier that usually it's the same schema, but for response it's a different schema. So we are going to say it's my custom schema, then we add an attribute, and let me refer to my schema. So the first attribute we start usually, like in SAP, it starts with D. Most of the things in SAP starts with D, and this is a list object. So we go down here, list object, and list atom is list of objects. So that means it's an object. Object. So we have D as a list and ID as an object. Now the ID is also another list. So this one is actually approved purchase order, the ID. This one is a approved purchase order. This is a list of again, I think 2 properties. First property is true and false. What happened? Oh, this should be a list. List of text, or list of, actually this is also list of objects. So let's go here. Type is object. So list of object, the first property is the message success, true or false. I'm trying to copy few things. The reason I'm doing this because to prevent the typos. And then the second is metadata. So we'll go here and then we'll fix the types later. So metadata, and this is again a list with text. So list of text, no, list of objects, and this is a text, and the text is a type. I'm pretty sure this one is not required because we don't care about the metadata, we care about the success. So success is a Boolean type, yes or no type, of true or false. So we'll select that as true or false, and the type is a text. So this concludes our schema for response. So this will tell us whether the approval or rejection was successful or not. Now we are good here. Now let's go back to our UI. Now on UI we had PO list, then PO details, and on PO details we have these 2 buttons. So these two buttons will call that create record request. Either they pass the approve or reject based on what we do here. So now if I go to, let's say, the variables here and data variables and PO source, we already have we were using this here, so that's fine. CSRF token is already here, auth token is there, PO number is there. Now we need one more page where we can allow user to enter notes before approving or rejecting. So for that, we'll go back there, we'll add new page, and let's call notes. We don't need the paragraph. Headline we can retain. We'll retain it, and we'll change that to PO number, just to make sure user is aware what they are approving. The content, we'll align it in the center. Okay. Now we need another container, and inside we'll put the input field. We don't need the label, and the placeholder will say notes. We can say approve / reject notes, and then we will add two buttons, one for submit and another for cancel. So this button, let's change this label to submit, and the other one is cancel. Submit, let's pick the greenish tone. So background color, go here, something like this. And cancel is more of red. So let's leave it like that. Okay, so we have this note and submit and cancel buttons, or submit and cancel. Now we have to create variables, because first of all we need the data source, because on this page we need a data source, and that we will add from our PO source. This is to get the single record. The authorization token is coming from our variable, so auth token. CSRF token is again coming from our variable, so that's CSRF token. ID is the PO ID, and this will be coming from the previous page. And to pass values between different pages, we have to create page parameters. So we'll create here a page parameter. We'll call this as PO ID, and a text is fine, save. So we'll go to data variable source, and in ID we'll select data variables and page parameters and PO ID, save. So whatever record we selected in the first page on the list will lead us to the detail page, and whatever we do on a detail page will lead us to our notes page. On a notes page we will pass that PO ID as the selection. So that we have. Now in here we need to hold these notes. We have to store somewhere, right, to pass to the service. So we'll create another page variable. Let's call this as notes, and text is fine. So we'll go down on the UI, we go to properties, and we will add value. We'll bind our value to this page variable, save. Now as far as goes on the page details, here we have to set our we have to identify the action, whether we are calling approve or a reject. So that we can again create another app variable. So let's add a variable and call this as decision. Type text is fine, and save. Now we'll go back to UI, and before that let me check if the recording is working. Okay, yeah, that's fine, it's working. Now we go here on this action, on press of this button or tap of the button, we need to call a new page. So we'll call open new page. In here the page is the notes page, so we'll say call the notes page. We link this as an input. Now whenever we call a page, and if it has a page parameters, it expects to have a value to be passed. And here we are going to pass a value of a data variable, which is the single record on the detail page, and that is PO ID. So save. Now this will load. This will call the detail page, and it will load the data if we need it. Along with this, we have to set a variable value. So Ours is the app variable. So before we load the page, let's set the value, connect that, select this, select the variable, which is a decision, and the value is fixed. Let me see what was it before. Config. Approve purchase order. So that was approve purchase order. That's the value for approve. And for reject, copy. For reject, the process is same. We set a variable value and then we call the page, but instead approve, here it's a reject purchase order. Reject purchase order and save. So on tap of approve, it will set the variable value as here as approve purchase order, and then it will call our notes page. And for reject, it will set it as reject purchase order, and then it will call the notes page. Is it notes? Yes. Okay, so we are done with this. Now we can go to the notes page back. Now we have the input as notes. We also have a PO. So we are ready to create a record. To create a record, we go here again in a function flow window here down there. We'll drag the create record. In create record, since it's we only have one data source is pre-selected and is expecting to pass the authorization, CSRF token, decision, POID, and notes. These are the header parameters, URL and header. So authorization, we go back to our app variable, select auth token, the CSRF ID, again data variable, app variable, CSRF token. CSRF token, we fetched it in our login request or a login button press or tap. So if you want to see it, go back and review the second video. Decision, again, we have it in an app variable, so we'll take it here. And then POID. Now the POID on the same page, because we had just reloaded that data, so we can reference to the same data source, or we can use it actually from the page parameter. In that case, we don't have to make a second call. But for easiness, I'll just leave it that way. And notes, we have a app variable here. No, we have I created a page variable, so hold on. Oh yeah, it's a page variable, so that's fine. We have it on the same page. So we go to notes, data variables, page variable, and notes, and save. So now all these parameters are mapped. So we have authorization, CSRF token, decision, POID, notes, and that's all. Now, these are URL parameters. We are replacing the placeholders, or we are setting it in HTTP header. Apart from these, there is an option to add record properties. Here, we can actually populate whatever we want to. But in this case, we are not sending anything. The body doesn't really matter. It's just the URL parameters. So we will leave that as empty. No changes in there. We'll connect this here. Now, the create record has two outputs or output ports. First port indicates the successful of the submission or creation of record, and second port indicates there is an error. If it is a first port output, that means our record is created or request has been submitted for approval or rejected successfully. That means we have to navigate back to the list. So to navigate back, we can go back here again and we use the function to navigate back. Connect this to the first port, and now navigation back has a property where you decide how many levels you want to navigate back. So we are on a third page, first being a list, second is a detail, and third is the notes. So here we can say I want to navigate back the current page, the previous page, so that means 2. This should bring us to the list page. And if there is an error, then we can show a toast or an alert. It really depends on what you want to show. So here we'll say error in submitting requests. Okay, so this will give an error. This will submit the request and it will fall back. Now, did we connect all the dots? So let me go CPO details again. Tap, set variable, open page, reject, set up variable, open page, and on notes, where is my notes? Here. This is notes, map to the notes. Okay, on submit, yeah. Where did the create record go? Oh, so it's a wrong place. See, that's why it's very important to review. It's not on an input, it's supposed to be on a submit. So I'm just copying it here. If you don't know, you can copy the logical functions directly by selecting them to another place. So this, we don't need it. On input, there's nothing. So you have to be very careful when you create your functions. You select the appropriate component on the top. Okay, so we have on submit, on tap of submit, we call the create record. And based on the result of create record, we either navigate back or we show an error message. Cancel, on the other hand, should just cancel and go back to the detail page. So this should be navigate back, just one step. So cancel on the current page and go back and save. So now if everything is in place, and I'm hoping everything is according to what we did, it should work. So let me log in on my phone, login. Okay, so is my phone visible here? Yeah, that's good. So now I'm going to select the PO21. We see we have approve and a reject. So I'll say approve and I'll put a note, approved, and submit. And that's it. It worked. So if I, for some reason, this is not getting refreshed, but 21 should be approved. How can I reproduce? So if I go back, log in again, there's no auto refresh. So you can see now we have PO 22. So that means the 21 PO is approved and is removed from the list. So that's all for this video. So thank you for watching.